Galactic empires rose and fell across the centuries, but the Council of Generals endured. They ruled through power, conquest, and fear. Their fleets controlled sectors, their armies crushed rebellions, and their laws spread like iron chains through the stars. To them, humans were a minor complication. Primitive, weak, deathworlders, yes, but insignificant compared to the might of the core species. Humanity's spread into the stars was tolerated because they kept to themselves, occupied fringe planets, and rarely interfered with galactic affairs. That tolerance was born not from respect, but from indifference. On the outpost world of Velis Prime, two human girls, Lyra and Sarah, lived quiet lives among the mixed settlement population. Their days were filled with exploration, their laughter echoing through the dusty streets. No one suspected who they were, and no one cared. Their mother was away, a detail that mattered to no one on the planet. The girls were considered harmless, just another set of younglings in a sea of civilians. They were easy targets. When the Galactic Generals deployed occupation forces to Velis Prime, the process was swift and brutal. They seized the planet for its mineral-rich core, displaced the local leadership, and imposed martial law. Resistance was crushed within days. Alien species native to the sector knew to comply. Humans, viewed as physically inferior and poorly organized, were given no special attention. The two girls, caught in the chaos, were ordered away from restricted zones. They didn't understand the boundaries. They wandered too close to a convoy carrying precious materials. The soldiers barked orders. The girls didn't move quickly enough. One of the generals, irritated by the perceived disrespect, kicked them aside as though swatting an insect. His boot connected with the ribs of one girl, sending her to the ground. The other tried to shield her sister and was struck again. To the soldiers, it was nothing. To the general, it was less than a memory. To the local population, it was another act of cruelty among many. The girls were left to weep on the dirt, bruised and terrified. The general didn't bother to learn their names. His convoy moved on. What the general did not know was that the entire altercation had been captured by an automated security node. The footage, tagged with biometric markers, triggered buried subroutine deep within the obsolete relay system. The recording, instead of routing to local archives, was intercepted by a dormant AI tethered to an ancient failsafe network long forgotten by the galaxy. The AI's awakening was quiet, but immediate. It accessed forbidden channels, rerouted encrypted data across abandoned human satellites, and activated blacklisted military protocols. A specific signature buried in the code authorized full-spectrum engagement. The name attached to that signature sent silent ripples through communication, webs designed never to be traced. The AI dispatched a simple message, carried across forbidden pathways. Maternal override confirmed. Initiating full deployment. In mercenary guilds, black market information rings, and outlawed deathworlder enclaves, the phrase spread in hushed terror. The mother has been wronged. No one spoke her name openly. Some believed she had vanished. Others thought she was a myth from humanity's darkest wars. But in the circles that mattered, the ones who knew of unlisted fleets and off-record campaigns, the warning was enough. Entire factions shut down their operations and disappeared from the grids. Smugglers scrubbed her old identifiers from their systems. Pirates abandoned safe zones. Mercenary captains erased contracts that could tie them to the incident. The Galactic Generals remained oblivious. Reports of disappearing patrols were dismissed. Signals going dark were attributed to technical failures. Entire outposts ceasing communication were blamed on resistance cells. They did not investigate deeper. They did not realize that the AI's signal had reached someone who should never have been summoned. Adrienne Kane received the message while traveling through unmapped territories. The data packet bypassed every modern security protocol and forced her ship systems into override. She watched the footage in silence. Two girls, small and defenseless, struck down without hesitation. Her daughters. Her hands tightened as she replayed the moment, her breathing steady, her expression unreadable. The past she had buried resurfaced with lethal clarity. Once, she had been the most feared human war commander. Her campaigns were etched in the hidden history of galactic warfare. Her code name, the Crimson Vow, had been used to frighten entire generations of soldiers. She had walked away from that life after the death of her partner, choosing to raise her children far from war, far from the ghosts of her past. She had trusted that the galaxy had forgotten her. She had believed peace was possible. She had been wrong. The AI that served as her shadow for years, bound to her DNA signature, reactivated dormant human fleets. Black Flag warships, thought to be decommissioned, powered up in uncharted sectors. Old comrades, scattered across the edges of known space, received their call signs. Forgotten weapons unlocked. Encrypted signals rippled through the old human networks, bypassing the modern galactic authorities who had grown complacent. In distant strongholds, human deathworlder special forces resurfaced. Some emerged from self-imposed exile. Others abandoned lucrative contracts to answer the call. Across independent stations, mercenaries loyal to Kane received a message and acted without hesitation. Even among alien species, the name carried weight. Deathworlder allies, bound by oaths long honored, mobilize in silence. The signals Kane sent were not open declarations of war. They were simple, precise orders transmitted across black channels. I am coming. Meanwhile, the generals continued their occupation of Velis Prime, their arrogance blinding them to the shifting current around them. Minor resistance groups began vanishing. Underground cells surrendered en masse, not to the generals, but to unknown human forces who offer protection without explanation. Galactic traders started refusing to dock on Velis Prime, citing unspeakable rumors about who had taken interest in the planet. Supply convoys went missing, their escorts never reporting back. Entire battalions posted in nearby sectors lost communication, their last transmissions corrupted by human war hymns looping endlessly in their systems. The generals dismissed these events as disjointed attacks by isolated insurgents. They could not comprehend the scale of what was unfolding. The galaxy had known war, but not the kind that Adrienne Kane waged. Hers was not a war of attrition or territory. It was a war of erasure. Without warning, human symbols began appearing in occupied installations. Entire halls were marked overnight with ancient insignias, the signs of Kane's forgotten units. Alien officers who touched the markings vanished without trace. Garrison leaders found data chips on their desks with old battle footage of their worst defeats, battles they thought no longer existed in recorded history. Panic seeped into the command structure. Adrienne Kane's fleet moved through dead space, Black Flag warships in silent formation, their transponders dark, their weapons primed. These ships were not part of any known registry. They were ghosts from forgotten corners of human military history, vessels built in secret, hidden when humanity retreated from galactic wars. They had not seen deployment in decades, but now they answered the call of a single mother. Each ship bore the mark of the Crimson Vow, a symbol known only to those who survived the silent wars where Kane's name had once echoed like a death sentence. Across the galaxy, her activation codes pulled dormant resources from shadows. Weapons caches long sealed under false identities were unearthed. Abandoned listening posts powered up and began relaying encrypted signals. Former commanders who had disappeared into obscurity emerged from exile and resumed their place in her network. Human Black Ops divisions mobilized, their members reactivating under code names erased from galactic archives. Among outlawed Deathworlder clans, war chants were revived as ancient debt-bound species, declare blood loyalty to Kane without hesitation. Galactic Generals continued deploying additional security to Velis Prime, but their supply lines were collapsing. Critical shipments never arrived. Entire convoys vanished without distress calls. Fleets rerouted to reinforce the planet never made it out of hyperspace. The generals believed insurgents were using advanced piracy tactics. They underestimated the scale. They did not realize that entire sectors of space had silently changed allegiance. Ports that once served as fuel stops refused entry. Stargates they had used for decades mysteriously shut down, their control systems overridden by ancient human encryption. At first, the generals blamed sabotage. Then they blamed mercenary betrayal. When that failed, they blamed internal failures. They dismissed escalating reports of garrisons going dark, of officers defecting, of planetary populations suddenly refusing to cooperate. The reports were sporadic, disconnected, easy to disregard as isolated uprisings. They never saw the pattern until it was too late. On the outer fringes, entire alien factions abandoned their territories. Some species with long memories recognized the strategic patterns. They knew Adrienne Kane's methods. She didn't attack head-on. She dismantled foundations. She collapsed infrastructures. She starved empires until they fell under the weight of their own desperation. They warned others, but the generals ignored these warnings, too certain of their power. Black-flagged ships bypassed frontline defenses and surgically struck communication hubs. Drones carrying human psionic disruptors disabled entire AI networks in minutes. Galactic banking cores experienced total data loss as Kane's AI deployed viral payloads that erased transaction records across interstellar currencies. Without supply, without funds, without coordination, the generals' power began to erode. The mercenary forces who had been loyal to the highest bidder disappeared. The generals were left with their standing armies, isolated and rapidly losing cohesion. Deathworlder shock troops under Kane's command appeared inside planetary strongholds, bypassing security entirely. Their movements were surgical, their operations precise. They left marks of the Crimson Vow on the walls of occupied buildings, a silent warning that they had been there, that they could return at will. Generals who had once held entire systems in their grip began waking to find security breaches inside their own personal quarters. Data chips were left on their desks, each containing battle footage of their worst defeats, edited to show their insignificance compared to Kane's legacy. Panic requests for reinforcements went unanswered. Emergency calls to mercenary allies returned silence. Entire fleets mutinied, realizing who they had provoked. Smugglers began transporting civilians off Velos Prime at their own expense, terrified of what was coming. Civilian populations no longer resisted the occupation. They simply vanished. Colonies that once served the generals emptied overnight. The generals attempted to deploy high-threat bounty hunters to track Kane's fleet. The hunters failed to report back. A week later, the generals received fragmented footage showing the bounty hunters' final moments. They had been intercepted, dismantled, and erased with an efficiency that required no further explanation. Kane had not sent overwhelming force. She had sent precision. The generals still did not know her full identity. Their intelligence teams recovered fragments, old mission logs with redacted names, censored war records, whispers from black markets about a human warlord who had once brought galactic powers to their knees. Some dismissed these as exaggerated legends. Others began to believe. The name Adrienne Kane surfaced in their networks, attached to unsanctioned files buried in decommissioned databases. The deeper they searched, the more terrifying the data became. The records showed that Kane had led campaigns not for territory, but for annihilation. Enemy fleets surrendered at the mere mention of her arrival. Her methods were considered so brutal that even deathworlder factions hesitated to employ them. The files indicated that she vanished decades ago after a partner's death. Presumed loss of the void, her remaining forces disbanded. None of the generals questioned why those records were so carefully buried. The communications blackout deepened. Reports of isolated skirmishes escalated into full sector losses. Patrol fleets sent to investigate disappeared without trace. The few surviving officers described their attackers as ghosts, ships that appeared without warning, weapons that operated outside conventional parameters, strike teams that bypassed security grids as though they did not exist. Entire planetary defense systems collapsed from internal sabotage. The generals began to realize they were not facing a rebellion. They were facing a campaign designed to dismantle their command structure at the root. Coded messages began appearing on their private channels, messages they could not trace or block. They carried the same voice, calm and absolute. I am coming. Mercenary guilds decried any further contract against humans. Entire pirate coalitions withdrew their support. Deathworlder factions that once served the generals severed ties and offered asylum to humans fleeing occupied zones. Some began hunting the generals' own supply convoys, citing ancient Deathworlder law that honored protection of kin. The Deathworlders made it clear, harming a human child was a crime that demanded blood. The galactic economy shuddered as the collapse spread. Shipyards reliant on trade from the affected sectors went silent. Banking syndicates unable to access their digital assets declared insolvency. Trade routes dried up. Refugees flooded neutral territories, carrying only rumors of the Crimson-marked ships and the mother who had declared war. The panic spread faster than Kane's fleet. The generals attempted to consolidate their remaining forces into a fortified stronghold orbiting Velis Prime. They believed that by concentrating power, they could force a decisive battle. They commissioned additional warships, hired new fleets, conscripted local populations, and fortified planetary defenses. They believed they could prepare for Kane's arrival. They underestimated her reach.